But then the opposite of that is dating someone who may be so good for you that you feel disgusted. And that sometimes that can really come up for people who are actively working to heal from the being so attracted to the people that bring up the deepest wounds. And that
That's
sometimes
right.
the opposite, that our nervous system can't receive the things that actually may be really amazing for us. And that disgust can sometimes be an indicator that it's like you've reached the end of your telomeres. You've reached the end of your ability to receive, like there's something that's like pushing away something that actually might be really beautiful for you, but because there's a deep sense of unworthiness inside, we're pushing it away.
Right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Love Sugar Podcast. I'm your host, Jeanne Byrd. Welcome to the Love Sugar Podcast, transforming love lives one bite at a time. I'm Jeanne Byrd, your host, a love and relationship coach and health coach, specializing in creating love, sustaining love, and if necessary, completing love in a healthy way. And I also have a Master of Science degree in health coaching and advanced nutrition. In today's episode, we're talking about desire, sensuality, and sexuality, and how our self-care, nutrition, and mindset affects our ability to connect to and live out our most intimate desires for love, connection, and fulfillment. And be sure to stay tuned to the very end because I'm going to share a link to a quiz that you can take in the privacy of your own home to assess where you are now and where you want to be as it relates to your sacred sexuality. You know, the interplay between body image, sensuality, and desire is complex and very personal. By fostering a positive relationship with our bodies and making mindful dietary choices, we can unlock the full spectrum of our sensual and sexual desires. Engaging in practices that promote body self-awareness and self-love can create a fertile ground for desire to flourish, allowing individuals to embrace their sensual selves fully. I'd like to share a beautiful quote here. Your sexual energy is your most potent, untapped resource. When you awaken, heal, and integrate your sexuality, you electrify everything in your life. This is from Dr. Caroline Muir of Divine Feminine Awakening. And to discuss this rich and profound topic with me today is Women Speak CEO and Taoist certified art and Qigong instructor, Casey Baker. Casey Baker has been a pioneer for the last 14 years in bringing a feminine approach to public speaking and leadership training with her unique embodiment and nervous system rewiring practices. Her company, Women Speak, has speaking circles all around the world and teaches women how to cultivate the internal safety and freedom to speak up authentically in their personal and professional lives. Several years ago, while running her company and raising her child, and after experiencing significant betrayal and loss of a significant romantic relationship, Casey experienced deep fatigue, stress, and health and hormone issues. She discovered feminine Qigong practices, and they completely transformed her energy, vitality, and stress levels, and healed her heart and womb. She has now started Velvet Flow, a practice incorporating sensual movement and feminine Qigong to help women learn to use their sexual energy for creating greater health, deeper serenity, and abiding happiness. She has spoken and taught at the United Nations in Switzerland, was an advisor on authentic communication for Senator Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign, and supported women in speaking on stages like TED, Bioneers, the American Heart Association, Wisdom 2.0, and Emerging Women. Casey is also a stewardess of sacred land in Sedona, Arizona, and a deep lover of nature. So welcome to the Love Sugar podcast, Casey.
Thank you. So happy to be here, Jeannie.
Oh, so happy to have you. So I'd like to dive right in today and squeeze all the juice I can get out of our time together. So I think the place to begin is by defining some of these terms that we'll be talking about today so that me and you and our listeners are all on the same page.
Great.
So I think let's talk about desire first. I just want to say a few words about it and then have you weigh in as well. So desire has its root in the Latin phrase, to await what the stars shall bring. And I particularly love this as it speaks to a holistic orientation of desire that is holy and right. You know, the word desire has gotten a bad rap in society, in the past. Sometimes we're not clear on what our desires are and what it would look like for them to unfold. And what's also true is that many of us have had a somewhat ambivalent relationship with our desires. Maybe they've sometimes gone unmet, or maybe we have not believed that we could really have what we desired, or it wasn't safe to have them. So we shut down our wanting. We numb out anything to avoid the pain of not having what we so deeply desire. We can't see the future. And when we can't see something and how it might happen, we feel all alone in the universe. And since we just can't figure it out, it stands to reason then that we would just dim down our desires. So I wondered if you had any thoughts around that.
Well, I love the quotation that you read, or at least the definition.
Yeah.
I think that is so beautiful. That is my experience, is that for me, desire is the experience of an idea of what could be created or what I could experience, combined with the feeling of aliveness or joy or ecstasy or delight inside my body. And I know that if I have a thought like that, an inspiration of something I could experience or something that I could have or some type of relationship or connection I could have in my life or whatever it is, plus that feeling of openness in my heart open, I know that is my true north. And every time in my life that I have said yes to following it, to putting the energy into feeding and nurturing that desire, or just staying connected to the feeling of the joy of it, and it has come into my life, it has always led to an expansion in my life in some way. But I think there's one thing that I wanted to share, because I think you mentioned a couple of things that might happen for people about not either going for their desires or trusting their desires. And I think that for some of us, it may be that we had a desire and then we had it, and it wasn't always easy.
Right.
It wasn't a fairy tale. It didn't answer all of our problems. As a matter of fact, it might have created some new sense of fulfillment or excitement or deliciousness, but then it might have carried with it a whole host of other challenges that came with it. So I don't think our desires are meant to make us happy. I think that our desires are meant to help us grow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that when we follow those nudges, sometimes there will be miracles and excitement, amazing things that happen, but it may also open the door to experiencing other parts of ourselves in that situation or in that relationship or receiving that thing that doesn't feel good or that feels contracted. And those are parts of ourselves that experience is meant for us to meet and to help
Yes. Oh,
love those things open, to help us grow.
yeah.
So it's easy for us to, because I hear a lot of people like, I wanted the house and the car and the husband and the kids and I got it all. And then I wasn't happy. So it must have not been right for me. But is that true? Is
Is
that
that
true?
true?
Were you
Right.
wrong for following those desires? And I think that then sometimes what can happen is we don't end up trusting a lot of our desires, right? We don't trust, oh, do
Right.
I really want to
No,
go for that? Or, but
yeah.
I think that, um, but it may have been that those desires are put in place for you to have that experience so that you could realize that there is actually something else meant for you. And how else could you have discovered
Right.
it?
Right. I just, I love this. It's so absolutely spot on. And again, when we're dealing with our desires, we have to look at the lens of our own consciousness and where we're centered. Because if we're centered from a place of lack, if we're centered in a place where we don't believe that we can have what we desire, then, as I was saying earlier, we do tend to numb them down. And
Yeah.
what you're saying, listen to it as communication, as something for you to pay attention and to then course correct your own consciousness. In other words, expand your relationship with yourself and get to
Yes.
the truth so that you can then meet the moment when that desire bubbles up in your consciousness.
And there's so many things that, I mean, it's just living a life devoted to tending what your desires are, I think is actually the point. More than what you get in fulfilling the desire. That's also amazing too. But there's something about the devotion to living a life, paying attention to what are my desires and following and feeding your desires, that process is actually so fulfilling because when we are connected to our desire, we're so alive. When we're disconnected from our
Yes.
desire, that's where life feels gray. And like
Mm.
we wonder, what happened to myself? Where did the fun, wild woman I used to be go? And that's when we
Yeah.
can know, oh, maybe have I really tuned into what my real desires are recently, or am I so caught in what my responsibilities are? Am I still caught in how I feel like I'm supposed to be showing up? And so that's when it becomes like a deeper devotion in our life becomes the connecting to what is my desire, what do I want, and feeding that because they will grow. It's like a tree that just bears fruit, and every season has the juicy fruit, and then the fruit goes, and then we have to go and tend again, and it's a different fruit. It's the same, maybe the same
Yeah.
fruit, but it's not exactly the same one. That it's a whole other initial bite into something that we grew that is so amazing, whatever the form is. And that is really the beauty, I think, of living a life that is devoted to desire, is that it connects us to our divine guidance and to this love that is living through
Yeah.
us.
That's right. I love that, our divine guidance, because
Mm,
each one of us as individuals, we have our particular essence. We have our soul, our life force energy. And so we're being guided by different things. So really to pay attention to that, that's our uniqueness. That's our contribution
yes,
to life,
it
you
is.
know?
And it's so unique for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I love about it.
There are,
So how about if oh, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say, because I think it's really, uh, a woman whose work I just love, Saida Desile. She talks about, your authentic desire versus like these like manufactured desires. And we can
Mm-hmm.
get into like being in manufactured desires. Like, what do our parents want of us? What does society
Oh,
want of us? And so we can think that that's our desire. But sometimes we have to go through doing that in order to realize, oh, this isn't actually my authentic desire. Then we kind of then move into or graduate into then the space of connecting to and the question, what is my true desire? And that's where when you can really tell what is your authentic desire is what has your body fully turn on. That's the
right.
litmus. It's the idea or plus the body, the turn on, the opening of the heart, the flow of joy. That's how you can really tell the difference between the two, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. It's so alive and dynamic what you're talking about. I mean, when you can feel like all the cells just tingling, you know,
Yeah.
that you know that that's for you. That's for you to pay attention. And that's not to sweep it under the carpet, but to go for it, even though you don't know the when, the where, the how, the why, is just to lean in and move in that direction to fulfill
Yes.
those desires.
Yes.
You know, and to let go of the outcome of what it's going to look like, to go on the journey, you know, whatever that is. So, how about if we move on to sexual energy? You know, like what is it and what purpose does sexual energy serve? I know you have a lot to say about that.
Well, I do because I mean, it has been such a profound inquiry and contemplation for me for so many years. Um, I'll speak about my own experience around this and, maybe
Yes, please.
be curious to hear how this maps for you. So, for me, growing up and coming into puberty with more of my sexual aliveness really came on so strong at about 15, 16. I mean, I had like, dating so many boys, I mean, I was just boy crazy, crazy, boy
No
crazy.
doubt.
Oh my gosh. But at that time, my sexual, I mean, it's like, I didn't know what to, it's like, I didn't know, nobody sits, very, very rare that anybody would sit down, teenage girls and be like, help them to talk about a healthy relationship to their sexuality. For me, so much of it became kind of wired into my energy of really like deeply wanting to feel so loved and, and, and,
Yeah.
and worthy of love. And so a lot of my consumption with how I look and my body and how I flirted and all of this, really the underlying was the question, am I lovable? And my sexuality kept confirming to me attention and confirming that question in a positive way for me. But that also ended up leading into, I think that what happens for so many, especially women in our society, that we get so much validation and sense of the value of who we are from the external perception of our sexuality and our body. And so, in a way, I finally realized in my 30s, in my early 30s, that I was basically, in so many ways, my sexuality had become like a commodity. I was using it to
Yeah.
get attention, so innocently. It wasn't like it was malicious. This is just what we grow up in this society, right? Using it to get attention. Um, and and that for I think a lot of people it can also be a way to bring in love, to get in connection, and I think a very old thing that we've inherited as women is that our sexuality, our looks become a commodity to get a partner who will provide. And so
Right.
these are really
Right.
innocent things, but in my experience, until they are really honestly seen without judgment and just to see the web that you're in my experience, it becomes very difficult until that quest happens to connect to the truth of the value of who you are and the deep gifts that are within.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
had to really go on a journey of healing that. And when I did, that was when I connected to my authentic voice. And when my life began to drastically change of sharing the wisdom and the internal beauty within, and I began to break apart this identity of my sexual energy is something, some part of me that gets things, gets love, gets attention, from actually the identity of who I am. And then I was able to really start to see my sexual energy in reality and
Yeah.
understand it for actually what it is. And that process is and was for me absolutely life changing. Instead of my sexuality being centered around the male gaze and
Oh, yeah.
the experience in our society, it became centralized inside of me. And that journey has been incredible over the last, I would say, 2 decades. That has been my deep inquiry, is the nature of my sexuality and exploring the power of it for creation. Initially for creation, I got so into connecting to my sexuality, what I want to create, and channeling my turn on with into what I want to create, and I manifested so much. I am a manifesting queen. I mean, I manifested miraculous things, and I mean, and it has been a joy. But then I stood in the center of all I had manifested in my early 40s with my child, who's part of my delicious manifestation on my sacred land that I manifested somehow being to own, with this incredible international organization that I built from my wisdom. And I was exhausted, absolutely
Yeah.
exhausted, drained,
Yeah.
stressed. How do I hold all that I have manifested? And that was when I really woke up to the realization and the incredible teachings that came into my life to help me in really cultivating this. But the understanding that my sexual energy is not only creative energy, it is healing energy. And that
Yeah.
was when I went on the journey of really harnessing the power of sexual energy to heal, restore, and revitalize my body, my organs, my nervous system, my endocrine system. And I transformed from being completely burned out, ragged, my hormones were all over the place, exhausted, to being the healthiest I have
Yeah. The
ever been.
hormones depleted. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I really see sexual energy as, it is the river of life, and it is the river of love, and it is inherently the force of creation that we all come from, and that doesn't stop. It just keeps going, but it's also profoundly intelligent and wise, and it has deep codes of healing power inside of it as well. And so I just think sexual energy is
Yeah.
the most fascinating force, period. And unfortunately, there is so much confusion and shame around it
There's so
that
much.
keeps
Yeah.
us from seeing it for what it is.
I know that was my experience. And as you're talking, I was just had these flashes of memory of, I think I was way older than my 30s, probably in my late 40s before I began to really not feel ashamed about my sensuality or sexual energy, because when I was working on film sets, producers would come up to me saying, tone yourself down a bit. You're a little too enthusiastic. You're a little bit too joyful. It's coming off. It's giving the wrong impression that you're being overt sexually.
Oh,
And that just landed with me like, I need
I'm
to
so sorry.
tone myself down. Yeah. And so,
Oh.
it wasn't until I got out of the film business and took a very early retirement and to begin my dream job, of coaching, to get off a film set where everything was, probably not fair to say, laterally, but kind of, shallow, with the way people looked and what society said and what the etiquette of, the people on the set was, so everything had to be in a box. You were
Yeah.
basically in a box to serve the movie, to serve the director, to serve the egos. And so I was definitely a late bloomer. And that's why, and we'll talk about it later, I'm so enamored and enthralled with your work, because I feel like, this allows people to be, especially women, to become women earlier, authentically.
Truly, truly. It's so true. I 100% agree with what you just said. Yeah. And I'm so sorry that you went
Yeah.
through that and people said that to you. But I'm also very happy that you've landed where you are because your work is so amazing.
Oh, thank you. So I'd like to move, I guess, basically just it's really the essence. What you're speaking about is the essence of who you are as your own particular individual human, and I really
Yeah.
love that. And would that everyone could really appreciate their own uniqueness, their own essence, and really foster that, like you're talking about earlier, the expansion of that, so we can fully
Yeah.
become ourselves in this lifetime.
Truly, truly. And we just can't if we're not connected to embracing our sexuality because it is our creative life force.
That's right. That's
Mm-hmm.
right.
This journey is inherently a journey of deep embodiment.
Yeah. With every choice and every action we take, really. So let's move on to our body, our relationship with our body, and how that affects our capacity to experience sensual and sexual desires. Because I know that for me, especially in terms of, interpersonal relationships, that no matter how much someone desired me or told me that I was desirable, if I didn't feel it internally, there was always some invisible barrier to me being able to get out of my head and really connect with my partner. So, how does body image fit in, and how do we express and experience our sexuality?
Gosh, it's such a fundamentally, it's such an intimate, developing such an intimate relationship with ourselves. And I'll just tell you this as an aside. Right now, I'm living in Scottsdale. And I've been between Sedona and Scottsdale, and it has been really fascinating to live here because the culture is so, more than any place I've ever lived. It's just, there's just so much surgery and all kinds of things going on. And that
Yes,
is,
there is.
yeah. And, that is every person's personal choice of what they want to do with their body. But I think that, and I try to listen to older women that I admire a lot who are further down the road. And I listen to, there's some people that I just really respect. Like one of my favorite actresses of all time is Emma Thompson. She's genius.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
a genius actress.
Jeez.
So I'm not sure how old she is now. I think she's like in her late 60s, maybe.
Yes, she is.
Yeah. And I've really appreciated her speaking about the time we waste. Actually, I feel like I want to cry just talking about it. The time we waste.
Yeah, tears are welcome here, my dear.
Yeah.
Absolutely welcome.
Being obsessed with how we look rather than how we feel, and rather than tending the art, the creativity that lives within us, right? And I think that is the trap. And I feel like one of the ways out of that trap is in cultivating a deeply personal, intimate relationship and exploring your own body and knowing who you are and how you feel beyond how you look. Because how you look is, that's wonderful. Of course, I tend how I look. I care about how I look. But this is so like these things can be, these are not what's ultimately going to last forever, right? But
That's right.
what can last forever and what can deepen over your lifetime, for sure, even if the body
Yeah.
changes, is the depth and the power and the richness of your sexual life force energy, and the depth and the
Yeah.
power and the richness of your creative energy. And they are one and the same force.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. And, I've been reading a bit lately about neuroplasticity because,
Mm.
that's really about the brain. Historically, oh yeah, the brain's going to age and everything's aging. But that's not so. The neuroplasticity is really about how it keeps changing and expanding as long as we are present to it, as long as our life force is strong, that our neuroplasticity is always fluid and evolving.
Mm.
So our body might be changing, and we can certainly help that, to the best of our ability. I'm always working on various body parts to get them up to speed. I think we're all doing that on certain levels.
Totally.
But really, then it gets back to, the core foundation is your relationship with yourself in terms of your body image. There's a story that Catherine Woodward Thomas talks about. One of her clients came to her, and she was about 150 pounds overweight by her own admission, and she had just gotten through a course in chemo from breast cancer, and she was totally bald. So here's this woman, getting out of her car and getting gas, and she was just so happy she was done with chemo, and she was celebrating herself, and she was singing at the gas pump and having such a beautiful time. And this guy looked over, did a double take. They started talking. Anyway, long story short, they started dating. From the last report, they're still together. And so it was that internal light within her, that life force that he was attracted to, So it didn't matter what her weight was,
Oh,
So
it's the
that's
energy.
really authentic body image,
Yeah, it's so true. And I think that as we cultivate, exploring our body, how our body feels, getting to know the pleasure inside, how energy moves inside of us, like being curious and opening that up, it naturally develops a more loving and appreciative and grateful and awe-filled perspective of this amazing miracle that we are walking around in. You
I love
know,
that. It is
otherwise
a
we can
miracle.
get caught in the trap in our society that we are how we look, and the validation that we get based on how we look is who we are. And a lot of people
Yeah.
never get out of that. But I think there's what's one of the amazing things that's awakening now is to the energy that flows through us, this light that flows through us, this love that flows through us, this creativity, and
Yeah.
that is the river of our authentic expression and who we are and the seat of our value. I mean, and becoming to that changes how we feel about our body, and we can relate with our body with so much more compassion. I mean, I will share, I guess like 2 years ago, I I started doing a whole new thing of strength training, and I ended up having this terrible pelvic floor pain because of a
Oh,
nerve that got entrapped with muscle I was building around some really improper alignment in my body. And I had to go on a quest to figure out what this pain was, but this pain was excruciating, excruciating. And I
oh,
had been on this quest of, I mean, of course, like I want to be strong. I want to be healthy. I want to feel and look my absolute best, and so I had been really tending my body in that way, and I had to slow everything down to figure out this pelvic
yeah,
floor pain. I had to get personal, like, what is it? It's like physical therapy. Excuse me. I was going to say personal trainer,
yeah,
but physical therapy, and start from the beginning of rewiring structurally what's happening in my body, and then building strength around that. And it has been a slow process that has taken a lot of patience. I put on like probably 8, 9 pounds around it, maybe 10 pounds, something like that. I don't even have a scale. I don't weigh myself, but
Yeah.
something around that, and
Yeah.
and it has been such an incredible journey for me of deepening my love for my body and not
Yeah.
willing to push past pain to look hot, you know, and
Yeah.
instead slow down, be patient, rewire, do the work, and build strength and health around proper alignment. I mean, it's been so humbling, but such a profound opportunity for me to go
Yeah.
deeper and to really love and
Yeah.
accept myself. And that has been really profound for me.
Yeah. That's a beautiful story of self-awareness and self-love, I think, and also getting out of your ego. I know I've really had to get out of my ego. I've been doing yoga for about 30 years, maybe longer. And for a variety of reasons, in 2006, my yoga teacher in California said, Jeannie, if I could, you know, tell you not to come to class, I would, because this is hurting your body. So he recommended Bikram yoga to me, which I've, been doing. But because I have an autoimmune, it's every year I'm doing just a little bit less and a little bit less. And I do my modifications, but I have to leave my ego at the door and just be happy that I'm in the room and on my mat,
Mm,
just doing what I can,
yeah.
because I used to be that person that had to do every pose perfectly, and now my
Oh,
body's
so
saying no,
insane.
you know. So I love that what you're speaking to. It is about self-love and
Mm,
self-awareness. And I wanted to move in now because we sort of talking around it, but there's other emotions that I know that I've dealt with my clients in the past as it pertains to their body, and that's shame and disgust about their
mm,
body. And shame either contemplating the sexual act or in the middle of the
mm,
sexual act, or just disgust with their own body or their partner's body. So how
mm.
does someone who is not confident about themselves physically, how do
Oh,
they
gosh.
navigate the discomfort?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I think that shame, that's, I mean, first of all, I think it's wonderful that you have clients that are opening up to tell you about it because, as with shame, the most important thing with shame is really being able to find a safe place and a safe listening to talk about what's coming up. You know,
Yeah.
what I have definitely seen for myself and also with other people is that when we get into feelings of disgust for ourselves or another, right? Um, that's such a strong feeling of just like
Yeah.
absolute aversion, that there's usually something under that,
Yeah.
that there is, that it is a something in, it's almost like, I'll give an example around this. There's been like a wonderful teacher that I've gotten to spend time with talks about how sometimes when you're actually, sometimes it makes it really easy if we are like having or dating, let's say, somebody that instantly you're super attracted to, right? But
Yeah.
sometimes with that comes a lot of, especially if we haven't already done a lot of the deep work, patterns, conditioning that draws us into that person that may be mirroring someone from our childhood, that we need to still do healing work around, right? It
Absolutely.
mirrors to us sometimes things that are actually, part of maybe some trauma conditioning or something around that. And a lot of times, for a lot of people in relationship, that will arise in a relationship where there's really intense chemistry, but then the opposite of that is dating someone who may be so good for you that you feel disgusted. And that sometimes that can really come up for people who are actively working to heal from the being so attracted to the people that bring up the deepest wounds. And that
That's
sometimes
right.
the opposite, that our nervous system can't receive, the things that actually may be really amazing for us. And that disgust can sometimes be an indicator that it's like you've reached the end of your telomeres. You've reached the end of your ability to receive, like there's something that's like pushing away something that actually might be really beautiful for you, but because there's a deep sense of unworthiness inside, we're pushing it away.
Right.
Just like if we feel disgust
Yeah.
with ourselves, we're pushing away an aspect of ourselves, because underneath that disgust is a deep experience of unworthiness. That actually, when
Absolutely.
we feel disgust of ourselves or of a partner over there, actually, then it's to pause and be like, okay, as opposed to reacting to that, is this maybe pointing me towards a part of myself that I feel
Yeah.
disgusted with, or a feeling of unworthiness. And so that's where disgust, I think, is really interesting and not fun. And of course, we want to just follow the things that only feel sexy. But sometimes there can be a tremendous teaching and growth and expansion of just going deeper to see what is at the heart of this disgust. What is it?
Yeah. And I think too, like in my coaching with people, then I'll ask them, how old are you right now? What is the age you're at? Because there's usually, like you were saying, there's some wounding from childhood that is operating here, and it is alive and kicking in this moment, in this relationship.
Yes.
So it's definitely, the warning. But luckily, there's help here. Because there's people like you and I, with our different modalities to help people, to help them see their blind spots, to help them evolve out of these patterns of the past that have kept them living a dimmed down version of themselves. So, there is hope. But I think another thing too that's happening, sometimes people, because of their wounding or trauma that has happened in childhood, when it pertains to sex, they disassociate.
Yeah.
It's like they leave their body,
Oh,
and it's so
totally.
sad. Disassociation, like the psyche just views the intimacy as so unsafe. And so they just leave the planet, so to speak,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the coping mechanism to just be able to have survived whatever it was that happened in the past, that had to be what happened. And unfortunately, then for a lot of people, there isn't an opportunity to then recalibrate to safety. And so that is part of what then being in relationship as an adult later and doing deep healing work then becomes about, is how do we recalibrate to safety? And so much of that is about slowing everything the F down. And, really, like if dissociation is happening in sex, take sex off the table for a while, come back to some of the basics of just consensual touch.
I love that.
I mean, just the basics of consensual touch and building upon that, and only with people who really honor your no and your slow down and your wait. And if there's somebody that's not, that is not the person to rewire with. And the rewiring for safety is the most important thing. It is, to give yourself, because then everything stems from there, that's actually truly in alignment for you. But yes, I speak as someone who has had to do the work to not dissociate anymore.
Yes.
Because I couldn't say no. I had, sexual experiences in college and right after college with people that I dated, that I was in relationship with, that I loved, that I felt terrified to say no, because, or I didn't want to do the things that partner wanted to do, because I didn't want to lose the love. And so healing that, like the self-abandonment, pattern that comes in that.
That's right. The
and
self-abandonment.
slowing everything down to learn what is my no? What is my yes? What is my no? And that has been some of the real gift for me of going and studying. And I started in my 20s. It was a huge part of what led me into to beginning to really study Tantra and Taoist.
Oh, yeah. I'd love to hear about that. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I really was deeply led in my early 20s to exploring Tantra, and a lot of people think that means like the sexuality aspect, but it's that's just one aspect of Tantra, and but it is a deeper way of living, of cultivating intimacy with everything, and
Yeah.
a real intimacy with life, and that sexuality and intimacy with another person is one expression of that, but we're talking about the entirety of like a person's life experience, being more intimate with your own emotions, your own sensations, right? Experiencing deep fullness in the moment. And that really led me into studying tantric and Taoist practices, and then going deeper into studying the sexual energy cultivation elements of that. And that was where I didn't quite know what I was getting myself fully into, but I think a part of my soul really did, because that was where I started doing the deep work to really heal the part of myself that just was so shut down in speaking my truth in intimate
Right.
relationship because of the profound fear of loss. And that came from my own traumas in childhood and abuse, and, these things that can get really locked in at an early age. And so my path was so much about, and this is so much of the gift of tantric practices, Taoist practices, is instead of just focusing on the physical aspect of intimacy and sex, you begin to really focus on the energetic and just being more aware of how you feel. And
Right.
that, combined with the voice work that I did to cultivate the safety to speak and share what is my yes and what is my no, and the realigning of my what I worshiped. Do I worship, and am I devoted to my own truth and to fundamentally my authentic self, or am I devoted and worshiping the need of other people's love? And I
Right.
had to really
Right.
heal that, and that this space gave me that opportunity to really do that. And so I completely transformed my experience of communication and intimacy as a result of that. But it's also given me profound compassion for people like you talk about, who disassociate, who can't speak up in so many
Right.
situations where sexual energy is involved. And it's really easy for some people to look at that person and be like, well, that person's not empowered, as a judgment. And that is really like not helpful. What is important to
Not helpful
understand
at all.
at all, and I've encountered that with people, I mean, anyways, I don't want to get too deep into that, but what the most important thing is to say about that, I think, is that I think that in our quest to explore embracing our sexual energy, we all have wounding of certain kinds
Right.
growing up in this culture. And that in the quest of it, there's going to be amazing opportunity to heal places where our voice is shut down, or where we feel shame, or where we've had trauma.
Right.
And that's part of it. It's easy to think, well, it's just all orgasm. It's all fabulous. But I think that what
No.
scares a lot of
Would that it be
people,
that easy?
yeah, but what scares a lot of people about going on the quest to really learning to explore and expand their relationship with their sexuality is like, oh my God, I may meet these things. And what do I do then? And so
Yeah.
this is where I think finding really great, trusted, trained support is very important, because there's
Right.
anybody out there now can say that they're a
Yeah.
sexuality, intimacy coach, all this stuff, like 20 years old, and but finding people who are, again, really safe to do this process of the healing work is so important, whether in relationship or with, trusted professional people.
Trusted professionals, and
Mm-hmm.
that really speaks to the transformative practices that I take my clients through, which is, basically what you're speaking of with a little bit of a different flavor, but it's really, you know, combining the adult resourceful self, our adult self, with our younger wounded self, and creating this mentoring relationship that the adult has with the younger self to help make empowered meaning out of what happened in the past, because we're not responsible for anything that happened to us when we are children at
Mm-hmm.
all, but we are responsible as adults to make empowered meaning out of that and to understand through with help that it was never about us. It was about the lack of
Totally.
capacity that our caregivers had, the way they saw the world and walked through the world, that we were then victims of their lack of consciousness. So we then have now the power to evolve out and graduate from those patterns of the past so that we can show up making choices as an adult so that the
Mm-hmm.
past doesn't get the final say in your future. You
So
create that future
true.
on your own,
That's so true. That's
you
so
know?
beautiful and true. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, I really love your story here about, the Qigong and the burnout. And I just wondered if you could
Mm.
share a little bit more about the practices. What does it look like? Like somebody like me, I was very fortunate to, I've been following you for years, and I was very fortunate to be with you in Sedona in June and exposed to a way of looking and feeling and moving my body in a way that I never had before, and also understanding the body parts and how they're integrated, the spleen and the lungs and the heart and the kidneys. And so I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about that to people who don't know what Qigong is.
Yes. So Qigong is an ancient spiritual practice and healing practice that is well over 5,000 years old, that stems from China. And it was the initial understanding that came from the development of Qigong, of understanding how energy and the meridians flow through the body. And that over time then became what led to the development of acupressure and acupuncture. So it's an incredible healing practice of understanding how energy moves through the body and how we can do it through movement. So you may have seen people who practice Tai Chi in the parks. So this is beautiful, slow, grace-filled movements. Well, Tai Chi has enormous healing benefits as well, but it actually comes from more of the martial art tradition. Whereas Qigong is the
Okay.
more healing and medical and spiritual development tradition, but the two are tremendous amounts of intertwining. So Qigong is a beautiful spiritual practice that, if, I have had explored so many forms of meditation and spiritual practice over the years, but I first started studying Qigong about 20 years ago. And to me, and that's deepened over my life. And what I love about it, and what I hear from so many people who love it too, is that you can experience profound experience of oneness and profound experiences of deep, deep, deep peace and presence and energy, like calm aliveness, calm and energized. Like you have enormous energy and vitality, and you're completely serene and feeling all the feelings. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean you're completely zenned out, right? You're actually flowing in all of the feelings and emotions that exist in you, except that the whole point of Qigong, the whole aspect of it, it is about creating harmony with all of nature and harmony with all of yourself. And that harmony, that experience, what I can say, and like that feels like maybe very philosophical ways of talking about it, just creates an experience in your life of like being profoundly free from stress. and it's amazing.
Yes.
And incredibly resilient to stress, so that when it does happen, it does not rock you like it used to, just integrates and moves through, of being able to have tremendous energy, and and the ability to feel so radically alive. And there are schools of, and Qigong and Chinese medicine really embraces and understands the power and the vitality enhancement of your sexual energy. It does not exclude it, like a lot of other spiritual traditions that are just about like meditating and almost like leaving the body or being so zenned out. You're just like, the body's like,
Yeah.
bzzz. This is actually profound flowing aliveness in the body with deep peace. And so one of the focus that I have, and what has been so life-changing for me as a spiritual practice and the deepening of my own spiritual connection and presence, but also my vitality, has been the understanding of how my sexual life force energy, your Jing energy is what they call it, it is absolutely the center point of your vitality. And you can learn how to take it and move it through the body to revitalize all of your major key organs and your endocrine system and your nervous system and your brain. I mean, you spoke earlier about, everything like as we age, the brain declines, like all the studies around that. Well, actually, the system of Qigong that I have been deeply trained in, we focus on taking your sexual life force energy, and for us as women, really taking our ovarian energy and moving that energy into the brain. We've actually found now, I mean, for the first time ever, there is finally research being done on what happens actually in the transition of menopause. It's been a huge mystery in the medical field, what actually happens in menopause. We're actually starting to get some really good, decent information now what happens, and it does affect the brain, right? As the sexual hormones decrease, there is cognitive decline. And women are so much more prone to Alzheimer's than men.
They sure are.
But one of the big connections they're seeing in that, it is because of the decrease in sex hormones in the brain. And so one of the geniuses of understanding Qigong is the understanding of how to take your sexual life force energy and cycle it through your body and feed your brain with this energy, so that your body it's a tremendous longevity practice of staying very youthful and completely with it into the late years. You see people who practice Qigong who are like in their 90s, and they're just like sprite and present and fluid in their body and vital. And so it's a tremendous longevity practice. And that's one of the reasons why. It's also an understanding of how to really support our key organs by removing and releasing stagnant, stuck energy in our body and in our organs, and keeping fresh, revitalized energy or qi moving into our key organs, our endocrine system, our brain, so that the body is flowing in health. And it's a tremendous health practice. But it's also a really beautiful practice for cultivating deep spiritual intimacy, because the system of knowledge in the form of Qigong that I have studied and trained in deeply, it understands how to take your sexual energy and not only move it for your health and vitality, but for deep and spiritual connection. And how to cultivate that for yourself, and then do practice what's called dual cultivation with a partner. And you're literally together helping each other to cultivate, deepen, grow, and expand the power of your sexual energy for your health and well-being, but also for having beautiful experiences of deep oneness and connection. And it's the system of intimacy and sexual intimacy and Taoist practice is so ancient and it's so beautiful. So there's just tremendous benefits also on a spiritual and sexual intimate level as well, with your own self and your own connection with the divine and with the partner.
Right. I love that, because, sex does change for people. as they age. And so to know that you have all different forms of intimacy to explore it's just so exciting to contemplate. I love it. I
Oh my
love it.
gosh. Totally. It's so
It's
true.
just,
It's so true. I mean, it's
yeah.
an amazing playground. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing.
So I'd
There's,
like to move
yeah.
to some of the tools that we have now to shape the sexual energy within us. And some of those tools are really in the form of food, and food is nutrition, but it's also a way that feeds our cells and keeps us alive. And it's how we celebrate and
Yes.
show love and care and how we comfort and soothe ourselves. So, what we're choosing to put in our bodies is
Mm.
no question. It's either helping or hindering the quality of our intimate lives, sexual, sensual, or otherwise. So I would
Mm.
like to share a couple of tips
Great.
about, your nutrition. And the first is, of course, to eat intentionally. A lot of us numb out when we're eating. We're grazing or we're, multitasking, but really to be present to every morsel, whatever it is, you know. And also I'm always talking about this to the poor listeners, but really it's about changing our diets is hard. But we really want to begin to learn how to make choices that are feeding us, not detracting from our life force, not stopping our life force. So I just like to say, remember, with every bite, you're creating your future.
Mm.
So I think, and the other one is that to choose foods that prepare you to feel free to express your sexual or sensual desires. So foods that energize you, make you feel lighter. Whole foods like vegetables and fruit and unprocessed grains and healthy salads with avocado or olive oil. So I just wonder if you have any ideas about that, Casey, in terms of food and preparation for the optimum expression of your sexual and sensual energy.
Yeah. Well, if you have a big meal, all of your energy is going to go into your digestion. Your whole body is
Yeah.
going to go to support digestion. So it won't be as available at all to be able to move around and explore the bounds of sensation and pleasure and all of that, whether you're pleasuring with yourself or with a partner. And
Right.
so, if you want to really optimize feeling really present in your body, present with your partner, really feeling the bounds of what's here and available for you with pleasure, and not just pleasure but also the love and connection with your partner. um I highly recommend not having a huge meal before you are intimate with your partner, or exploring with yourself in that way. And just having the simple thing to remember that, your energy is going to, if you want your energy to be really available to explore the bounds of intimacy and love and pleasure and connection when you're being sensual with yourself or with your partner, then don't get it all tied up in digestion. But at the same time, and I'm like a blood sugar person, I always have to be making sure I tend to my blood sugar. You don't want to crash either and be like lethargic
Right.
and low energy before. So having like a very small meal that has some good protein and fat in it will help you to feel more, to have more energy your body can use for the experience, but it's not being weighed down in digestion like if you ate like 3 slices of pizza, you know? So
Yeah.
that's like probably one of the things that I would recommend for that, especially if like, if you're going to have a longer, which I would hope that you would have a longer session with yourself or a longer session with your partner, you want to get into it, then yeah, make sure you nourish beforehand, but choose wisely. Choose foods that you're going to feel good after you eat and that you won't feel weighed down. So those are the things that I would
Right.
say, just sort of like a blanket statement,
Yeah.
about how to best
Yeah.
prepare.
I couldn't agree more.
Mhm.
Yeah, again, that goes back to your relationship with yourself, right? And really being intimate with yourself and knowing what your body needs and honoring that,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So, another subject I'd like to talk about as we get towards the end of our time today is, you know, I've been able to speak with some of my clients that they really in their partnership have mismatched libidos, and so someone is really wanting to have sexual interaction and the other one isn't ready. And so what do you say about that? What would you, I know what I do on a more of a spiritual level and also more on a individual self-relationship level, but what would you in terms of Qigong recommend for people who are experiencing this mismatch?
Well, I mean, that just happens all the time, you know? I mean, I think that changes in libido going, if you're in a relationship, we go through phases, whether there's stress, you have children, or, work,
Yeah.
or there's sickness, or hormone challenges, or whatever it is, like it's going to happen. You're going to have mismatched libido. And so I think that that's where one of the best things you can do is expand your plethora of toys on the playground. And when I say that, I don't necessarily just mean like sex toys. It's not what I mean, but ways that you can play that match and
Yeah.
meet where each other are. So
Yeah.
the what I have definitely found, and one of the reasons why I love Taoist sexual energy practices so much, and what they have provided for me in my relationship, has been that there are times where, I've had a partner who had a lot of intense sex drive. I mean, ready to go in like a second, you know? And I may be in a space where, it's like the end of the day, in the evening. I've been working all day and then tending to my kid. And I don't have that, like, unless maybe I'm more ovulating, it's not as like get up and go, but I want to connect. It's like
Yeah.
it's a different place. Like I want to connect. My heart wants to connect. I want to be sensual, but I'm not in the I don't have the like rawr energy, to match where they are. And so that's where having, my partner and I had been really focused on also cultivating our Taoist sexual energy practices together. And those were so wonderful because they really are about like really more deeply feeling each other, slowing things down.
Yeah.
It's not as much of a hot sex as it is like a deep, cool sex. It's actually delicious. And what happens for me is that when I feel so deeply felt, when I feel my
Mhm.
partner being so present with me without agenda, that's where my energy will then naturally start to come out, and more turn on comes out, and more desire, and
Yeah.
I will have orgasms that are so rooted in my heart being open because someone is so present with me. If I
Yeah.
can't state this enough, that we grow up in a culture where there's a lot of porn, and we think that sex is just like bang 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 bang, like that is, for me as a woman, so profoundly unfulfilling. And I understand it's a
Yeah.
flavor, and sometimes you get in a hot space and you just want to be taken like that, but that's not always the space that I am in. And but the value of having a partner that will feel me deeply where I'm at, or you feeling your partner deeply where they are at, we bring that depth of presence to each other. That creates the environment where sexual energy will start to just naturally unfold and dance. And when we do it without agenda, when we do it without even needing to necessarily get to penetration, when we do it without necessarily needing to get to orgasm, and it's just an exploration of being present in our touch with each other, our attention with each other, that is where all this energy will come out. But it's when we think we have to like get hot, get, that's where it feels like there's a lot of pressure. And it's like, I can't conjure that right now. So I don't want that. That feels like too much work. But you can take the exhaustion off the table and meet the person with the quote unquote lower libido or the lower energy by just being present in your touch without agenda and the space to just see what unfolds from there. That's where you're going to get true intimacy. And whatever happens from that place will be
Yeah.
fulfilling. But that does take communication between two people of talking about that, because not everybody has explored or learned actually how to be really present with their touch or with
Right.
their attention without
Yes.
agenda. So I think that the biggest thing that I would say in answer to your question is to undertake the exploration within yourself internally of deepening your presence. Meditate your attention. You practice Qigong, phenomenal form of learning how to be present in the body, right? These things, meditation, Qigong, these things will help you learn how to drop the agenda of the mind and
Mm.
actually see the person in front of you, touch them, actually feel them. And I can't say, that may sound like so boring to some people, but actually what it is a superpower, and it awakens sexual energy and intimacy when we bring that level of presence. That's the most important thing I would say, because it's going to open up a
I
whole new
love this.
plethora of options and how to connect sexually
Yeah.
when you cultivate that.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I'm just over here, having the happy dance, because it also, what I'm picking up too is that it's taking the pressure off of a lot
Yes.
of times men, have to perform. And, I feel so bad for men in this, but if really partners getting together and just, like you say, explore, I love that word, explore with deep presence each other's bodies and hearts, and just observe each other's heart opening, like a flower petal blooming. It just feels so reverent to me.
Yes.
And
Oh,
would that be that, so much love would exist in this world if people, when they're partnered, would be this kind of loving as you're describing?
yeah.
It's so
It's such a gift
profound.
we can give to each other, because we're not always going to match and be like, let's get it on, we're just
Yeah,
not. But we don't have to sacrifice connection and intimacy because of that,
right,
right? It's
right.
actually a way of
Yeah,
really being able, like, you have mismatched libidos, is actually a way of like being able to really practice the art of like being with each other where you're at and opening to each other where you're at. And that can be profoundly um healing. But like, as you said, there can be a lot of things to work through around that, like the shame, not being able to
yeah,
perform consistently, all the pressure around that, or as a woman not feeling like, oh, I don't feel so sexy, but I know that I should, and and
yeah,
it's like, how can we really meet each other as humans and
yeah,
provide presence and touch and love each other in the present moment, and then we just get to see what's here. And that's why cultivating, learning to be connected to our energy is so incredible, and Qigong is so amazing at helping to cultivate that, so that we can have so many more ways in which we can relate with ourselves and with each other that are so beautiful and delicious and wonderful, and very
yes.
different than anything you would ever see on porn.
Yes. Yeah. Oh God, I'm there with you. Absolutely. Oh, that whole porn thing is such a sad societal norm. But
It is.
at any rate, I don't want to lose the energy of everything beautiful that you've been speaking about today. And it has been beyond a thrill to have you on the podcast. I cannot wait for the listeners to avail themselves of your wisdom, your love, your energy, your heart, your life force. So
Thank
again,
you.
thank you so much for joining me today. Really, I'm
Oh, I
so
loved it.
grateful. And I just would love with you to share how our listeners can reach you and what you might provide for them so they can further, really learn of all of your offerings.
Yes. So I think probably the best two ways are, one is to follow me on Instagram, which is KC, just the letters KC dot Baker. And then you can go and learn about the feminine Qigong practices and work that I teach at velvetflow.co, C-O. And then we're going to provide for your listeners a link where you can actually experience a Velvet Flow guided practice. And it's beautiful. It feels amazing. It's really special. It's very unique. So we'll provide that link, and you can go and it's a 20-minute practice, standing practice that is really beautiful. So we'll provide that so you can have a direct experience of it for yourself.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And so everyone, listen to that. And really, I can attest to it personally that these practices are literally life-changing. And I know that I will be doing this for the rest of my life. It's just so nourishing and life-enhancing. So thank you, everyone, for being on the Love Sugar podcast. Sending you all so much love.
Thank you.
Bye for now. Thank you for listening and for watching if you're joining us on YouTube. If you got value out of this conversation, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you know when the next episode of the Love Sugar podcast drops. Until next time, always take care of yourself first.